Hey everyone, I'm Jen Mayer, and this week Father Mike talked about how God uses high points and low points in our life to grow our faith. And he pointed out that God often uses high points in our life, moments where we feel especially close to God, as anchors, particularly to help us face the times in life where things are not going well and maybe God seems distant. But in those low points, that God is helping us to build our faith. The thing about all of that is, in a Lenten series, Grow Your Faith, it doesn't feel like any of that is within our control. That is, I can't control when the next high point or low point of my life will be. So, is there anything that I can do right now that helps me figure that out? And it turns out that if we go to the writings of St. Ignatius of Loyola, one of my favorite saints, there is. So Ignatius founded the Jesuits, and as he was training the men, he encouraged them to do a daily exam, and that is every day to look back on their day, almost like a movie reel in slow motion, and to look for the moments where they felt closest to God and where they felt most distant. And we could translate that today into a series of two questions. So one might be, when did you feel closest to God, and when did you feel God's absence? But if that's feeling a little strange to you, you can ask easier versions of that. So when were you happiest, and when were you saddest, or um, what was the high point of the day, and what was the low point? Any two questions that kind of provide that contrast get us there. Because those different ways of asking the question still bring the key events into focus. So I did this for a couple months straight a couple years ago, and it was interesting what the doing this on a repeated basis taught me. So although I am a really strong introvert, it turned out that many of my high points of my day were in interacting with other people. Now, that shouldn't come as a surprise that God can use other people to be in touch with us, but it's not always obvious if you're a really strong introvert. Um, and then in terms of the low points of my day, it turned out they were often moments of sin or selfishness or um, not being careful and hurting someone else. And so one of the things that I learned through that was it would be wise for me to think before I open my mouth. Now I can tell you that several years ago, and God keeps teaching me this lesson over and over again, and one day I hope to master it. Um, but by looking at those high and low points of the day, I still believe that God is able to teach me. And that was actually Ignatius's premise, which was that God used every moment of his life to teach him something. He just needed to be attentive to it. So the good news of this is you can also do this not just as a personal practice, but with your kids or spouse. So when I don't know, 15 years ago, my college roommate and her husband came to visit with their then 4 and 5-year-old kids. And as Katie and I were putting her 4-year-old to bed, um, I asked two questions. I said, so what was the high point or the best part of your day? And she, without hesitation, said, there were two playgrounds. And I thought, you spent 6 hours in the car today. Two playgrounds is a really awesome answer. I could see why that would really, and playgrounds she'd never been to before. Um, so I pressed my luck. I said, was there a bad part of your day? And she said, yeah, Daddy yelled at me. And I said, I'm sorry, why did Daddy yell at you? Well, I wasn't listening to what he was saying. And I went, there you go. Now, she would not have associated any of that with God per se, but as a practice, if she had been doing that on a regular basis, it'd be really easy for her as she got a little older to understand how God was shaping those moments or speaking to her during them. So you can also do this with your spouse. Just a word of warning that if the worst part of your day was something your spouse did, um, or your spouse tells you the worst part of their day was something you did, that you need to not use that as a moment to have a fight, but to absorb the info and move on. And maybe there needs to be clarification later, or maybe it was just something that you needed to know. But uh, fair flip of that, please don't use the low point of your day to slowly teach your spouse everything they do wrong. That's not the purpose of this. It really is a reflection. But when you do it with someone that you love, it's a great way of kind of bringing them into your interior life. So it's a great way to pray together. So rather than giving you hard questions this week, I'm just going to ask you those two questions. Where was God most present to you today? And where have you found God lacking?